Hi friends, welcome to our show Author and Books, and today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Dinesh Narayanan. Thank you, Mr. Dinesh Narayanan, for coming on our show, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. He has written a brilliant book, The RSS and the Making of the Deep Nation. The book has been published by Penguin. The cost is 699 rupees. It's about a 380-page book. It came last year in March 2020. It has done pretty well. Interesting thing is that those who are on the right of the center, because I've spoken to a number of people, those who are right of the center, they are feeling that this book is slightly left of the center, and those who are on left of the center, they are feeling that this book probably is slightly right of the center. So it's a very interesting positioning. But one thing I can say that the book is full of very good references, facts, and though there could be difference of opinion amongst different ideological people following different ideologies about the interpretation which Mr. Dinesh Narayanan has done, and we'll talk about that also. But I will start with the title of the book, the RSS and the Making of the Deep Nation. It's a very interesting title. Two things, Mr. Narayanan, I want to ask. One is that there are so many books which were coming out on RSS, and I believe it took you about 3 to 4 years to write this book, almost 3 4 years, and you researched for it. And correct me if I'm wrong on this also when you answer it. And second thing is that why this title, the RSS and the Deep Nation? What does it mean? Does it explain the essence of the book, or is it just basically a very intriguing title which kind of attracts the readers? So how do you, and was this title suggested by you, or is it basically kind of a brainstorming which happened between you and your publisher? Please.
Thank you, Arun, very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. We've known each other for a long time, and it's great to be here. Um, well, as far as the title is concerned, let me give a little bit of a context to that. Context to the book itself. So the book came about because Penguin approached me to write a book on the RSS 3 4 years ago. That was because they had come across an article which I had written, a cover story for the Caravan magazine. It was called the RSS 2.0, and how the RSS had brought the BJP to the cusp of power. That article had appeared just before the 2014 general elections, and as luck would have it, BJP came to power, and RSS was squarely in the limelight, along with the party and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So until then, the RSS was not as widely. There was not so much widely written about the RSS in the mainstream media or in popular discourse. Of course, when the Vajpayee government was there, there was a fair bit of exposure to the media, and both television as well as whatever television was there then, and the print media. I mean, there was no internet at that point of time, right? So the 2014 was very different, and 2014 was when the RSS sort of got into electoral politics in a very, very big way. It was almost like many RSS men told me that it was almost like a do or die battle for us at that point of time. And even some RSS leaders have made some comments saying that it was like at least to me, they said that it's like the emergency relived, and it's like the fight after the emergency in the 75, 77, in 77 elections. So post 77 elections. So the way it was positioned at that point of time in 2014, and having met with a lot of RSS senior RSS leaders, and the cover story was really a profile of Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, who had become the Sarsang Chalak in 2009. And this was 2009 when he took over. the general elections were just around the corner. I think he took over in March and the elections were in May. So this was really the first full-fledged elections which was fought by the BJP and the RSS under new leaderships, and both had new leaderships. So naturally, the limelight on RSS mostly comes in a way through the BJP, because BJP is the political party. It is the main public-facing so-called, flag bearer of the what is called the Sangh Parivar and that ecosystem. So naturally, in 2014, RSS was in the limelight, and then after that, post that, Penguin approached me to write a book on the RSS, and that's when I took up the project. So it took, you're right that it took me about 3-4 years. If you, I'm sorry, it took me that much time, basically to research the organization. And like you said, it is very difficult to find people in the RSS to talk to you. So it does take you a fair bit of time to build some confidence in people. And of course, as a journalist, what you're trying to do is also to approach a subject without any preconceived notions and without any sort of agenda. And that becomes very difficult when you approach the RSS, because the RSS always sees you as a person with an agenda. I mean, that's at least my experience. So it takes a while to break down those walls, and then to approach and to approach and say that, okay, what I want to do is an objective look at an organization which is extremely powerful in today's India, and the political party which is ruling the center with a full majority after 30 years is its ideological parent is the RSS. So naturally, it's a subject of deep interest to me. So, of course, a lot of people then opened up, and I'm quite grateful to them that they were quite open with their opinions, with their perspectives. And if you have noticed, the book primarily uses RSS sources, whether it is people, whether it is publications. There are very few sources which are outside the RSS. The reason was that I wanted to understand the organization. Of course, I was looking at it from outside, from an independent perspective. But I wanted to know what makes this organization tick and what is the organization's objective. Now, that is where the title of the book also comes from. It doesn't come from me, really. It comes from what the organization itself says. The organization says it doesn't want to be an organization within the society. It just doesn't want to be another organization. What it wants to be is that every member of the society should be part of it. So at some point of time, the RSS's final, if I may say so, some dream is that it would every single citizen of the country, every person living in this country would be its member. And then there won't be any difference between society and the RSS, or its ideology would have completely permeated the country, the nation, so to say. So that's where the title came from. So the idea that it is not just another organization which is competing with others, but it is an organization which wants a complete immersion in society, in the nation. That's why it's called the Deep Nation.
Now I'll come to the introduction of the book, and I will read a couple of lines, and then the question will follow after that. So I'm reading from page 17 of introduction, where Mr. Dinesh Narayanan has written, social theorist Ashish Nandi described it as a desperate attempt to capture within one's own self-culture traits seen as the reason for the West's success on the world stage. This is talking about the RSS. But more importantly, on page 16, he has written that the RSS is organized like a military, and much of its ideological framework is derived from 19th century European ideas of nationhood. And then it is followed in the same paragraph. He has written, it, however, which is the RSS, however, rejects the notion of nation state and instead believes in a cultural nation separate from the state. So, Dinesh, at one place, you are saying that RSS has derived its ideological framework from 19th century European ideas of nationhood, and simultaneously, you are writing that rejects the notion of nation state, which is a European idea, and instead believes, which is a European idea, are my words. So he has written that it, however, rejects the notion of the nation state. So, isn't there a contradiction between what you have written that because the basic premise, as far as I know, that basic premise on which the RSS works is that the RSS, most of the people have erred in explaining RSS or understanding RSS or understanding even, the concept of Hindu Rashtra or Hindu nationhood because they have looked at it from a typical European perspective. So you have written that RSS derives its ideological framework from this European perspective, but simultaneously you are also writing that RSS has rejected it. So how do you explain this paradox?
It's not really a paradox, and if it is a paradox, it exists within the organization because, like I said, I have gone with the sources within the RSS. So let me take you back to the 1960s, which is when Devras, Bala Saheb Devras, who was a Sar Sanghachalak, he gave us a series of 6 speeches in Kurukshetra. And those speeches, in my
In 1965, you have
that's
mentioned it
right.
in your book.
That's
Yes.
right. And that, in my opinion, is the most comprehensive sort of enunciation of what RSS is all about and what it's each of its arms, including Pracharaks, Swayamsevaks, the leaders, what they should do and what is their role in the organization is it's very well explained. And in those series of 6 speeches, he also lays down where the ideology comes from really, and what is it that they want to achieve through that ideology. One of the things which he quotes there is the British experience and how the British have inculcated patriotism, nationalism in their people. And he quotes, he says that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. So his idea was that, or what the idea which he imbibed from the British was that every citizen again has to be absolutely patriotic, and that has to start from, in his own words, from the mother's milk. And that's why RSS also, if you know it very well, that it tries to catch them young, as we say, and train them right from their childhood onwards, right? So that's where the idea of organization comes from. And this is not only Devras, but even before him, the founder, Dr. Hedgewar, he had mentioned an incident in Pune. In Pune, what happened was that he had told the Nagar Sanghachalak to get, I think it was a Sanghachalak, I'm not sure, or the Pracharak, to how soon would it take to organize all the Swayamsevaks of Pune in one place. And they had said it might take 3 days, it might take 4 days. And he said, no, I want them tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. This was in the evening, assembled in this ground. And the next day morning, he explained to them why he was trying to do that. And the reason he said was his experience from jail, where he said he found at one lunch hour, there was a bugle call. And the moment the bugle was sounded, every official in the jail sort of fell in line and came to the place where they were supposed to assemble within seconds, whatever arms they had, whatever they were wearing. If somebody was at lunch or eating something, they dropped that and came there. And he said he was pretty impressed by that organization, that at one call, everybody is present there and ready for action, whatever that may be. So this is the concept he wanted the organization to develop, that at one single call, you sort of assemble together and be ready for and be ready for the command, and you follow the command without question. That was the thing. That is where the idea of militaristic thing comes from. that it's as much as like the military. You have to, it's one command, and at one command everybody acts in unison. This is where the idea of military discipline comes from, and that's the reason I suppose a lot of people say that the RSS is a highly disciplined organization. Now the idea of nationalism, idea of patriotism itself is derived from the British, as is very evident from Bala Sahib Devara's speeches. So that is where this idea comes from, that it's coming from the European nationalism. When I say European nationalism, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of Europe's nationalism, because there were differences between French nationalism, between British nationalism, but the model which the RSS followed was particularly British nationalism.
I think probably a lot of people in RSS would disagree with this thing, and probably partially agree with your last statement, because they believe that the concept of Rashtra, it has been there since ages, and it's a cultural identity.
Sorry, I didn't explain that bit. So the idea of nation state and is certainly the European definition of the nation state. RSS has never followed. So if you, there have been controversies about the flag, right? So the RSS flag and the Indian national flag itself, there have been controversies over that. So the idea that the Indian national flag, or rather this one is a state flag and the other is a national flag, was also expressed by Hedgewar once. When he said that no, we should fly the national flag at Shakhas, and that is the Bhagwat Dhwaj. He had said that. So the idea of a nation in the RSS mind is slightly different from the idea of a nation state, where the nation state is the same as far as European nationalism is concerned, or European structure is concerned. The nation state is one, but in RSS's mind it is two. Like one is a nation, which is a cultural continuum, according to the RSS, and the state is the governing state. So to that extent, there is a difference in opinion in the RSS. That I agree, yes. But that's not my opinion. That's RSS opinion, like I said.
Yeah. So, and I think, you talked about this, Dr. Hedgewar saying that the saffron flag as a national flag should be flown on Shakhas. I believe it also because Dr. Hedgewar's lifetime, when he was he founded the RSS, it lasted up to 1940 when he passed away. And
that's right.
Even in late 1930s, there was a flag committee set up by the Congress, and which had recommended that saffron flag should be the national flag. So I think, but this whole controversy post-independence, when the tricolor was formed as a national flag, so a lot of people raised question, but those controversies have largely been settled also to some extent, and RSS has given, kind of talked about it. So we will not go into it, but we'll go into another this thing, because these are kind of more of now political discussions or trivial discussions. Which
absolutely. I just explained it because it was in that context. Context of the founding.
But you explained was perfectly fine. I'm saying this national flag versus saffron flag, and these are all trivial discussions which keep on happening, and your book is a much greater work of depth, and it's a scholarly work. Whether people disagree with it, whether people agree with it, I would say I have been myself tracking RSS, doing a bit of writing on it, so I find it a great, and I find it a lot of intellectual honesty in this book, that I can say. People can agree or disagree, but there are, in these times, these are such kind of books are very difficult to find. Where the intellectual, honesty is there. Either people are trying to, please somebody, or people are trying to bring somebody down, or people are trying to be part of the battle of narratives. So I would say, this is commendable that despite at that time, I remember Dinesh was working with Economic Times, and especially after having written, story in Karma. And I think this is one of these stories which has not been criticized that much, or people didn't take to, because Karma is known to be an RSS beta. But despite that, I think I have also read the story. It was a pretty, I would say, balanced story. Those certain portions, of course, I disagreed with in terms of interpretation. but not with facts. So that's a very important thing to remember, that facts, it's difficult to find facts about RSS because the documentation had not much documentation had not been done, because the RSS is working more on ground most of the time. It was only in 1990s, I would say, that or 1980s they realized that there is a battle of narrative.
Arun, I'm losing you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So coming back to this thing, you have talked about Balasaheb Devra's 5 lectures in 1960.
I'm losing you. I mean, your voice is breaking up.
But I can anyway. I think we can continue wherever this whole
Hear
thing.
me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have talked about Balasaheb.
Now it's better. Yeah.
So you've talked about Balasaheb Devra's 1965 lectures. Now, Sangh has been always saying that, it keeps on evolving. And I just want to put it, it's a little chaste Hindi, but that is the way it is explained. Then I'll explain it in English. That Sangh always says कि समय काल और परिस्थितियों के अनुरूप या उसके संदर्भ में संघ जो है वो जो समाज का मत होता है उसी के आधार पर अपना जो है किसी विषय पर मत बनाता है. Means basically depending on the time, the context, and the situation around whatever the society is thinking about certain issues. So RSS, as you rightly said, doesn't consider it to be part of society. It is society kind of a thing. So so they also formulate views. So certain views which are evolved, especially this issue came into light when 3 or 4 years ago, when the RSS Sarsangchalak Mohan Bhagwat was asked in Vigyan Bhavan in that 3-day series of lectures that about certain aspects on which Guru Golwalkar had spoken, the second RSS Sarsangchalak, and there Mohan Bhagwat had said that no, there are certain portions which are not relevant now, so we don't adhere to that. And then I've read also, that when the books on Guruji's thoughts and speeches, and when they get republished, so certain issues which were not relevant are not then, I think there's a book called Vichar Navneet or something like that. Anyway, so, and I'm going to link 2 things. One is that what you said about what Balasaheb Devra said in 65. Do you think there are certain core fundamental issues on which the RSS thinking or the RSS stand has always basically remained same? What they call, the eternal values or the eternal थिंग, जिसे हिंदी में वो लोग कहते हैं कि कुछ चीजें हैं जो शाश्वत हैं, जो बदल नहीं सकती हैं, और बाकी जो है वो इवॉल्व होती हैं. द रेस्ट ऑफ देम इवॉल्व. And I'm linking it now closely with especially another chapter of the book which you have written, which is on the Hindu economics, the third way.
Right.
Because it is economics which governs the politics.
Right.
So how do you see one part? There are 2 parts of this question. One is that are there certain core fundamental values or issues on which you find that the RSS stand will remain unchanged and it will not evolve, or there is no need to evolve? That is a core of RSS philosophy. Second is that how do you see this evolution in context of the third way or the Hindu economics or the economic philosophy? Because you have had a background in writing on economics, so I think you would be and also now doing this book, and especially this chapter I would recommend strongly to the readers, because there is not much which has been written on the economic philosophy of RSS, or how RSS has looked at, or the RSS worldview of the economic issues. So this is an interesting chapter, and I'm not saying that you agree with what Dinesh has written, but I think it's worth reading. So Dinesh, please.
Right. So I will again go back to Devras, who was once asked what is RSS economic philosophy, ideology, whatever. And he pretty much said that I don't think RSS has much of that. He actually said that. And he even went on to the extent of saying in one point, if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to go back and refer to it, that the communist parties have done more on the economic side. They have had more work done. I mean, this was in the I think it was in the early 70s, before the emergency, if I'm not mistaken. That is when he was asked that question. To some extent, it was to a large extent it was true, because the only real text before that was the uh, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya's work of 1957, which was called Bharat Ki Arthniti. So that was only, it's a very slim text, and it sort of lays out what should be a broad contours of India's economic policies, and what should be the ideology on which it should proceed. Apart from that, of course, Upadhyaya has written a couple of more essays, like a critique of the two plans, and a lot of it is also drawn from B.R. Shenoy's work as well. At one point of time, I think the Janasangh at that point of time also was coming closer to the Swatantra Party, but ultimately the merger never happened. I mean, they could not meet on several issues, but they did talk about trying to come together. So I suppose the party was quite was leaning towards, at least the Janasangh was leaning towards the Swatantra Party's liberal ideology, liberal economic ideology as well, which stressed a lot of importance on private property, etc., etc. So the Liberal Party's position itself was a sort of a reaction to, I mean, its formation itself was a reaction to Nehru's idea of cooperative. I mean, when at the Nagpur session, Nehru proposed cooperative farming. From there, the Swatantra Party was formed immediately after that, almost like a protest to that. So that was then. But later, when it came to the 90s, the position changed quite a lot, from being a liberal being close to liberal economics, to socialist sort of economics. So in the 90s, throughout the 90s, and even in the 80s, the Sangh organization pretty much were fellow travelers with the left trade unions and other organizations. So, for example, when the Enron agitation happened, the anti-Enron agitation happened, everybody was together in that. The anti-computerization, I mean, in fact, the Topan Thengdi, if I'm not mistaken, is on. He told some of his friends that they call me a communist in the organization. So there was this movement, which was quite opposite what it was in the 50s and 60s. And after that, after the Vajpayee, so in the 90s, in the mid 90s, which is also part of the chapter, the RSS came up with a sort of a Swadeshi blueprint on which the organization, the party, the Sangha Parivar should be moving, the country should be moving. But after the Vajpayee government came to power, the entire thing was ditched totally. So there was no talk about it at all after that. So again, it became the ideology, whatever the economic ideology was, what was of the RSS and the adjacent and the affiliate organizations. It was sort of it was neither here nor there. Even though the BMS, which was the only organization which had some sort of a consistent argument throughout. That was thanks to the Topan Thengdi, as well as K. Sudarshan, who was the Sarsangachalak at that time. And there has been conflicts with the Vajpayee government also because of that. A lot of conflicts have happened because of that. Later, even now, even today, you can see that there is a certain amount of conflict between the Parivar organizations and many of the economic policies which the central government is following. So it's out in the public right now. In fact, I've quoted several of the leaders saying in public how bad it is from their perspective. Very interestingly, I've talked about some of the older books in that in my book as well of the Sangha of the Topan Thengdi era. But one of the more recent books, which is a book called Mangalam Economics, which was I think you also have done an interview with Bajrang Lal Gupta. He was sort of the economic ideologue post I would say, I mean, in my view, he was the economic ideologue until recently. But you don't hear about Mangalam economics, right? You don't hear about it talked about anywhere in the RSS organization. So there seems to be this confusion. Whether it is a confusion or not, I don't know. I mean, it is for the organization, people in the organization to decide. But there is a one stream of thought. It is not an isolated thought within the organization, but it seems to have carried on for a very long period of time, and which is now, I don't know if it is discarded or if it has been kept aside, but it's certainly not the way which the Sir Sangachalak has spoken about Swadeshi economics repeatedly in his speeches. But a lot of people in the RSS, they themselves tell me that this is not the direction which the government is going, and this is not the direction which we want it to go. Now, that is, I mean, of course, they don't say it publicly; they tell you in private. But so there seems to be some amount of what do you call vagueness about it. What should be? What are the contours of our the India's economic policy should be?
It's a very interesting. But one thing which I want to bring in here, Dinesh, is that you said that not much of what the RSS economic philosophy was till a few years ago, that seems to be getting reflected in government actions, and people have talked to you about this also. I'm saying that isn't it there has been generally a kind of a practice, or there has generally been a kind of a tradition in media to look at the success or the evolution, or whether there is a contradiction in the RSS philosophy from the perspective of how much it is getting implemented, how much of it is getting implemented by the BJP governments. Whereas within the RSS, the general understanding is, as far as I understand, that okay, we have an economic philosophy, or we have a certain ideological stand on certain issues. The government of the day is of BJP, which is basically an ideological mentee. But there are compulsions of governance and politics, and there are certain things which they will try to do, and there are certain things which they might not be able to do, because there is a whole government machinery, there is a process, there is a system. You suddenly cannot go one day and impose a new economic policy or a new policy. Also, I join it with the fact that, or kind of intertwine it with the fact that the RSS has always said and believed that, to my understanding, that the permanent transformation of the society will not happen through, governance or politics. It is one of the key tools of this thing. And the only thing, when a BJP government comes into power, or जैसे वो समविचारी संगठन भी कहते हैं, or any like-minded party, which right now seems to be only BJP, comes to power, the only thing which happens is that the atmosphere is a little conducive in terms of that whatever RSS wants to do in terms of its organizational work, it can do, and it doesn't have expectations beyond that from the government. And I think it also learned, the organization also learned the lessons from 1990s, as you said, when the Vajpayee government came. And you mentioned that it was completely ditched, but there was a lot of skirmishes which happened between Swadeshi Jagran Manch and the government at that time. And there is also a talk that that Yashwant Sinha was replaced at the last moment by Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi as the finance minister, because the RSS had taken a stand. So all these stories had appeared. So RSS did had a or Swadeshi Jagran Manch did had a stand at that time, it seems. But of course, the government seems to, and now there is also talk that probably it was a coalition government. So there were a lot of things which it wanted to do, and it could not do. I'm just bringing all these things not as my viewpoint or this thing, but various strands of arguments which have been put forward on these issues. But now coming to this thing that now this whole debate that which I brought in, that okay, there is an evolution of an stand on certain issues, and the relationship between the RSS and the government, and especially in context of the title, the deep nation. So how do you look at this relationship between the RSS. And I want you to explain it in a broad philosophy. It's not about, Narendra Modi and Mohan Bhagwat or Dattatreya Hosapale and Mohan Bhagwat. As I mentioned earlier, these are all, trivial news stories, or I won't say trivial, these are all news stories, and we're not getting into that. And these are required as staple diet for, day to day kind of bringing out newspapers and editions of, magazines. But on a more broader philosophical framework, has the stand of RSS, or has the ideological stand of RSS in terms of relationship between the RSS and the BJP or the political party in power has evolved over years? And I'll just end my question with one thing, because we all know that after 1948, when the ban was lifted on RSS, a huge debate had happened where it is said that Guru Golwalkar had said that कि आप लोगों को अगर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनानी है तो बनाइए, मैं तो शाखा लगाऊंगा, broadly basically. So there was a section in RSS which wanted it to convert it into a political party, and then there was a section which said no, we should stay away from basically directly meddling into politics. So how from 1940s, late 1940s up to now, do you see there is an evolution of a stand, and especially, of course, over the last 7-8 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you take such a long period, I mean, there are many factors to be taken into consideration. So, for example, the general perception is that Golwalkar was a person who did not like politics, and he did not have wanted to do. I mean, he didn't want to have anything to do with politics. He would have rather somebody else do it because he thought it was probably not good for the organization or something. Now, I have a different view. I think it is because he was probably he understood what is happening in politics. He understood what is happening in the country, but he himself was not really cut out for politics. And that is the reason he did not want the organization also which he was leading to not be in politics. And the reason I say this is because in the Hindu Mahasabhas, which I have mentioned in the book as well, in the Hindu Mahasabha's first national convention, Golwalkar had stood for the position of secretary. Now, and he had lost. He had the backing of a fairly. I think he had the backing of Savarkar's elder brother, Baba Rao Savarkar. He had the backing of Savarkar, but in spite of that, Golwalkar had lost. Similarly, in the I think it was the 1946 election, where there was an instance where the Nagpur Sanghchalak was standing for elections on a Hindu Mahasabha ticket. He was asked to withdraw his nomination from there, and it is said that it probably was for the benefit of the Congress candidate at that point of time. Now, there are many interesting things like that. For example, Dr. Hedgewar never gave up his Congress membership, if I'm not mistaken, even until his death. So he was always part of the Congress in that sense.
I hope Rahul Gandhi listens to it.
But you see, the context of that time was different because there were Hindu Mahasabhites as well as leftists who were part of the Congress, right?
The Congress was largely basically
a kind of
national
party.
Movement.
It was a big tent. It was that's why it's called the All India Congress Committee, right? It's elected every year. It's not the same now, but it used to be elected every year. The president was elected every year. So from then on, that's probably the reason why I think that Golwalkar was not interested in politics and wanted to keep the party away from politics. Apart from the fact that that the 1948 trial made it very difficult for the RSS also to function publicly, and it created a lot of issues, which Devras has said that no, we saw that there was nobody to support us in parliament and legislatures, and we wanted somebody to do that. And that is why we went ahead and set up and supported the Jansangh. So he's on record saying that. Now, so that was the context of the 40s, and you know that in 1967, Jansangh had a fair bit of success and even formed a coalition government in UP and all that. But later on, many people in the RSS have told me that one of the reasons why the politics of the politics got vitiated, or let me not say vitiated, let me say that it became difficult for the RSS was also because it had straitjacketed itself into a position after the Sangha Parivar as a whole. Once the VHP started the Ram Janmabhoomi movement in the 80s, and from then on, the position became quite extreme after that, in the sense that it became very difficult to come back to closer to the center. Then after the 77, 78 ministry, where the Jansangh was part of it, and after the split with the where there was a big tent again, even though that coalition was a big tent, a large coalition of very disparate parties. So from Jansangh to the communist parties, right? And the split after that, and the dual membership issue, which sort of distanced them from others for quite a bit after the bonhomie of the jail bonhomie, so to say, during the emergency period. It was very short-lived. And then, as you know, the BJP went on a very different trajectory. Adopting Gandhian socialism and going on a different trajectory until 1986. From then on, BJP also started coming back into the fold. And during the Rajiv Gandhi government, and after the Rajiv Gandhi government, the turmoils at the center and how many coalition governments we had, the instability which was there for a very long period of time, and 91 Narasimha Rao government. And again, many people in the RSS say that Narasimha Rao was pretty close to the Sarsang Jalak Rajendra Singh, who was earlier Sarkariwa. So there was still a lot of conversation happening between the Congress and the RSS as well. All of it stopped, I think, post Babri Masjid. So from then on, it was like everybody was on their own path. So there was hardly any real conversation happening after that. And there is some amount of evidence to support that, to say that that Indira Gandhi also was preparing Ayodhya in a very different way. She was trying. She had ordered her government, which Narasimha Rao writes about in his book, that she had asked the guest houses to be spruced up there. So make Ayodhya a sort of a tourist pilgrimage/pilgrimage center. So there were so the political designs on Ayodhya started in the 80s itself, right? And that is probably the time when a lot of political parties started, and after the demolition of the Babri Masjid, is probably a lot of political parties started considering the BJP and the RSS as untouchables in a way, and not to have anything to do with. So which clearly that polarized Indian politics quite a bit, right? And that even I've again quoted in my book also an incident of there is a Malayalam newspaper called Janmabhoomi, which is the mouthpiece of the RSS BJP. And Janmabhoomi editor, at that my full disclosure, the person was my uncle. He was asked to write an editorial by the editor, and he said, "No, I can't write an editorial on this." And he's a member of the RSS, right? He's a executive council member. So there was a lot of debate about it in the party itself. I mean, in the organization itself, in the Sangha Parivar itself as a whole, which we all know a lot of these conversations what have happened. And I don't think it has gone back from it. I don't know whether it will go back to the more sort of decent politics where everybody was talking to everybody. And that is when the relationship between, if you see the after 2000 Vajpayee ministry, after the Vajpayee ministry collapsed in 2004, not collapsed, was voted out in 2004. You can see the conflicts between the RSS and BJP for a period of about 5 to 6 years. Major conflicts where there were even talk of whether you should completely abandon the BJP and set up a new party. And then, of course, the rise of Narendra Modi in Gujarat as a successful chief minister, and which was again an opening. And as I've again mentioned in the book, in 2008 is when the leadership of the RSS and now Prime Minister Narendra Modi started coming closer, and that is what has paved the way for a more amicable sort of relationship between in day-to-day politics between RSS and BJP, unlike the Vajpayee government. And so today's relationship, as you've seen, and again, like it is there mentioned as well, and it is known fairly publicly, even though it is not acknowledged publicly, that the many of the RSS organizations have been asked to go only thus far and no further. So that's my understanding as far as the government is concerned.
I think a lot of people are going to, get disagree with that.
I know, yeah.
The essence of whole, conversation is, people can agree to disagree. And as you rightly mentioned, I think, probably that era of 80s and 90s, even in, media also we see, unfortunately, that people are, I had never seen, over the last few years that either you are on this side of the fence or on that side of the fence, and the people even because I myself had a certain ideological this thing, and I worked with people, my bosses, who were from different ideology, and I didn't had to take a stand on as far as in newsroom is concerned. And I remember one of my editors in Statesman, he were making a very interesting comment one day. So there is this BJP, but there is the reporter covering BJP and the reporter covering Congress. So every evening there used to be a big fight on certain issue, argument. So one day, finally exasperated, he said, my tragedy is that I have a BJP reporter and I have a Congress reporter, but I don't have a political reporter.
No, that's very true. That's very true what he said. Very perceptive. See, it's not a problem only, it's not limited to India or BJP or RSS or anything like that. I mean, this is a problem you can see happening all over the world. And you can see a division. So one of the things which I struggled with when I was trying to look at world history and see if there are very many organizations like the RSS. The only other organization which has grown in strength and has retained its power in so many years as much as the RSS is the Chinese Communist Party. That's completed 100 years this year, and RSS will complete it in a few years' time. Right? So that's the only other organization you can think of, unscathed, which has unscathed in the sense that, that came to political power much earlier, and the organization backed by the RSS came to political power now, or let's say in the 2000s, right? The only other organization which I can see similar to this is an organization called Nippon Kaigai, which is a Japanese conference. Now, Japanese conference is an organization which has contributed 3 prime ministers. It's a fairly recent organization, set up in the late 90s, right? So there are not very many organizations where you can analyze this kind of a relationship between a political setup and the organizational setup. Everywhere else, the political setup and the organization is pretty much the same, and the ideological form is the same. Here there's a separation here. Now, the thing is, but the conflicts are happening everywhere in the world. Whether even in countries like the US, it's there. So it's no surprise that these divisions happen in boil down all the way to newsrooms, and I would say even to family levels. I've heard of. You heard about divorces happening in the US because there were Biden voters and Trump voters. So. Yeah.
So and we saw one case in West Bengal also. Now coming to the last question. Progress, but Dinesh said that there are very few organizations, and RSS also with whom you can compare. RSS, and RSS also believes what they call Sangh ka Kramik Vikas. They feel that whatever is happening, RSS is not an organization, or RSS is not even a movement. That is generally the thinking which I have understood within RSS is that. and RSS is a flow. And it's basically what you are looking at is not an organizational growth, it is a progressive unfoldment of RSS. जिसे आप कहते हैं संघ का क्रमिक विकास. So now you have talked in your book, though you answered it in the first, you answered it when I asked the first question itself, but a little more detail, because, and it's also, it also will be help to guide, it also will help to guide, people who want to write on RSS, especially the relatively younger writers who want to write on this subject. You have mentioned about a lot of insiders, interviews, story, and quotes, and conversations which you have had. Now you are an outsider, as you have claimed, and so I will leave it for readers to judge. And good, as I said, you have an intellectual honesty, because you put a disclaimer also that your uncle was in associated with RSS also. So how difficult, because this is one thing which most of the writers or most of the journalists feel this problem, that the RSS people do not talk. And one of the key reasons is they have always said, one of the core fundamental values which RSS Swayamsevaks are supposed to follow is Prasiddhi Parang Mukta. In simple Hindi, I would say कि मंच, माला और माइक तीनों से दूर रहना है. And in English, I would say, just stay away from publicity. You be a foundation stone, and don't claim any credit or this thing. So how difficult it was? How did you manage? We want to explain the craft, the trade secret, that how did you manage to, and how difficult it was? And were you able to get access to, though you have put in a lot of archival material, but were you able to get access to the RSS archives officially?
No, neither officially nor unofficially. Okay. I could not get access to the RSS archives. I mean, even see, for example, I did disclose that my uncle is a senior RSS leader, but even he did not speak to me, and I had to the incident which I mentioned. I put it out. I mean, I took it out from a book. I mean, I discovered in a book which was written by the editor of that publication. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to know about it. Now, the thing is, and I'll tell you how difficult it is to report on the RSS, because once I had gone to Nagpur, I think this was in 2000 and which one was 2017 or 2018? One of those ABPS was held in Nagpur. I think it was 2018, right? 2018 was held in Nagpur. Yeah. And I had gone there. And because there were some friends of mine, so they took me inside. And then I was practically inside
the RSS headquarters.
Yeah,
inside the meeting was going on.
Where the meeting was going on. And then somebody again saw me and said, "What are you doing here? You can't be here." And they threw me out of the place. They said, "No, you can't be here." So it is not easy to report in the RSS in that sense. And it's the same. It's officially a lot of people. There are only very few people who have said that okay, we will talk officially, and you can quote me. And I have put their names out there. I've taken permissions from them. I've played back whatever they had to say. So some of these people are also people with an academic bent of mind, and they also research on subjects. Like, for example, Srirang Godbole. Again, is a staunch RSS person. He was the Sanghachalak there in Pune, Nagar Sanghachalak, I think Vibhag Sanghachalak there in Pune, and no, Bhag Sanghachalak in Pune. And then he also is an expert on Savarkar. He runs the website on Savarkar. He has written several books as well. And he's a repository of, knowledge about the RSS. So he's one person whom I went to on many things. If I had to refer something back, if I needed books. Similarly, there was another, many other people who helped me with documents and books, which they had in their personal libraries or collections or whatever it is. So some of them helped because they genuinely wanted some, publication to look at the RSS in a independent manner. And one of the biggest difficulties I faced when it came to RSS publications was hardly any of the publication was footnoted. So you had no idea whether the person writing that book was, talking the truth or not, or it was just an impression or maybe a memory. You don't know that whether it's a fact. So it became very difficult to then cross reference. So I had to, or rather, I could not publish a lot of stuff. I could not write a lot of stuff simply because it was not referenced. I mean, there was no way I could validate it that it was true or not. And whatever I have used, as you've seen from the bibliography, I have used it, wherever it is possible to nail it down and say this is where it is written, or this is a person who has said that. Even the people who spoke to me off the record, I have used the information which they provided me or the perspectives they provided me sparingly, and kept it as much as possible to published work or on the record interviews. So off the record mostly has been used for perspectives rather than information. So there is no, nobody has given me a fact which I have hardly say, which cannot be cross-checked or validated elsewhere, or at least 2 or 3 people have validated it. So that's the way I went about it. I mean, usual journalistic practice, right? I came at it like a journalist. I am a journalist. I'm not an academic. So I was looking at it from a very journalistic perspective and went about it like a journalist. I mean, you know it better than me. You've been in the profession longer than me, and how to go about it, right? Yeah. So it's a reporter's book rather than a academic's work.
Yep. So though I said the last question, but one last thing, I think must have left you, because working on a book on RSS, and that too if you're an outsider, and that too to write, a book with so many references, of course, leaves you, pretty exhausted once you finish the thing. So, but going ahead, because you already have developed an understanding on this issue, and maybe probably an alternative view. And do you intend to, and as you said that, there are a lot of stuff which you have had, which you did not write, of course, because it could not be referenced, but you have that stuff, and there can always be, ways and means to, write it and take it to the readers. Of course, but you can take it even with the disclaimers also. But so going ahead, one, that do you intend to, or have you thought about, doing another book which could be a logical corollary of the work which you have done, taking it forward? And second is any advice for, people who want to write on RSS. So how they should, approach the subject, or what kind of challenges they are going to face. So, and whether they should try it or not.
No, they should certainly try it. I mean, why should they not? I mean, every aspect has to be, especially the scholars, they have better tools to analyze, they have better tools to do this kind of work than a journalist in that sense is quite limited with the tools they have. Academics are much better equipped. Only thing is that, in general, academics writing tends to be a little dull, and that's not the case abroad. Really, there are a lot of academic works which are eminently readable, and that is the only thing lacking in India, really. That scholars write in a more legible, easy to read fashion, and that would help a lot. As far as my next book is concerned, COVID has really, put paid to many of the plans. So some of the things which I want to research and to see if there is a book in it has not happened because the libraries are shut, and I'm away from Delhi and all that. So that has sort of stopped me a little bit. But yeah, at some point of time, I have to go back to it and see if I haven't really thought about whether there's another book on the RSS. That I haven't really thought about. But yeah, another book certainly. I'll have to decide on what to do and whether I will be able to research it enough or not. Because now access becomes a huge issue nowadays because of travel.
So thank you, Dineshji, for being with us. And we again want to tell you that this is the book which Mr. Dinesh Narayanan has written, and we have talked about it. It's again a 380-page book costing 6.99 on print, but I think online you get a lot of discounts these days. You can buy it. It's available in all the major bookstores, on airports also, and I think it's a book, good reference book also. And as Dinesh ji has said, it's a good read in terms of the people who want to learn the craft of writing also, on writing such subjects on which not much have been written, or on which much have been written but the authentication is missing. So and which is a continuously evolving subject. So I think it's a good book. People can agree to it. People can disagree to a lot of assertions which Mr. Dinesh Narayanan has made. Even I don't agree with a lot of things which he has interpreted. But of course, the facts there are pretty. And he has, the good thing is that he has not quoted the facts selectively, which often tends to happen when you have already certain preconceived notions or conclusions, and you customize the facts to support that. That has not happened, though the interpretations could differ. But I think, as we have mentioned in the conversation also, the essence is of the essence of a democratic setup is that we can agree to disagree, and the conversations must continue. And these conversations will continue. We'll soon be back with another episode of Authors and Books, with a new topic and a new author. And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, Nationalist View. You can also look at our website, www.thenationalistview.com, for more detailed stories. And again, thank you so much, Mr. Dinesh Narayanan, for coming with us. And I wish you all the best for this book also. And I look forward to reading more books also, and our viewers too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Arun. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.